Hello crafty friends, this is Jennifer and today I'm back with a new paper crafting tutorial. Thank you so much for joining me. A few weeks ago I posted this capybara card with a, let's call it a reveal wheel pop-up mechanism, and I promised that I would make a tutorial, and here we go. And the best way to do this is to start with a model. And here you can see my old model, which is probably past its best, but I still wanted to show it briefly as it might appear in the video. But now I want to create a more presentable version with you. And for the mechanism, you need a reveal wheel die set, specifically the large and the small circle, as well as the base panel. And you also need 2 brads and a strip of cardstock. The width and the length are variable, but it should be made of heavyweight cardstock or several layers of normal cardstock glued together so that it's sturdy. I used a hole punch to make a small hole in the middle of one end of the strip, just big enough for a brad. And I also need to punch a hole in the wheel. And it's important to note that you can create a different amount of movement for the strip depending on the distance from the middle hole. And to show you this, I'm going to punch 2 holes in the wheel, but you only need 1 for the mechanism. So I'm only punching 2 holes to show you the difference. And I marked the first hole 1/2 inch from the center and the second one 1 inch from the center. And please ignore the incorrect second arrow that I drew in. This should obviously stretch from the outer hole to the center. I have no idea what I did there. Now I punch the 2 holes, and then I take a brad and thread it through the hole in the cardstock strip, and then through the hole that I punched 1/2 inch from the center, so the one closer to the center, and close the brad on the back of the wheel. Then I stick a piece of washi tape over the prongs or legs so that they don't hinder the mechanism by snagging anything. And you can see that this doesn't hinder the movement of the strip at all. Now I take the second brad and feed it through the hole in the small circle and then through the middle hole in the wheel, just like you normally do with a reveal wheel. And then I use some foam tape on the small circle. And to position the wheel correctly on my base panel, I use a homemade template. I made a video a while ago showing how I made it, and I'll be happy to link it if anyone is interested. So and it's really easy to use. You just have to open the brad again, thread it through the hole in the template, and then close the brad again. Then you can remove the release paper from the foam tape and align the template with the base panel, which is pretty easy because they are the same size, and then press the wheel down. Then you just have to open the brad again, remove the template and close the brad again, and that's it. This way you can ensure that the wheel is always correctly positioned, which is pretty convenient, I think. So now I can stick some washi tape over the legs of the second brad so that they don't hinder the mechanism. Next, I need to turn the wheel so that the cardstock strip is at its lowest point, and then mark the bottom end of my card panel on the strip so that I can trim it accordingly so that it's flush with the bottom end of the panel and doesn't protrude. I want the mechanism to be hidden, so this is why I need to trim it. And of course, this can be adjusted depending on the base that you're using. For example, with a slimline format, then it can be much longer. But please note that this corresponds to the maximum length of the strip. But it can, of course, be cut shorter, so especially with the slimline format. Now when I turn the wheel, you can see that I have positioned my thumb to the left of the strip to keep it vertically aligned. If I take my thumb off, you'll see that the strip can change its orientation, but I'll go into this in more detail in a moment. Now I turn the wheel so that the top end of the strip is at the highest point and mark the bottom of the strip. So when it's on its lowest point, it ended at the bottom of the card, and on its highest point, it ended on my mark. And the distance between these 2 points is 1 inch, or twice half an inch, which is not surprising when you think about it, since the hole we punched for the strip is half an inch from the center. And so every half turn of the wheel moves the hole twice this distance, meaning twice half an inch for a total of 1 inch. And this also corresponds to the movement that your image will go through later. For comparison, I'd now like to show you what it looks like when we attach the strip to the outer hole, so the one that is 1 inch from the center. And to do this, I'm going to remove my wheel from the small circle so that I can remove my first strip and attach a new strip to the second hole. And I'm going to do the same things as the first time. And now that my wheel is in place, I can trim the strip. And can measure the distance from its lowest point to its highest point. And you won't be surprised, it's 2 times 1 inch, so a total of 2 inch. And maybe you've already noticed something. The strip is shorter than the wheel, which makes it impossible for me to keep it vertically aligned with my thumb. For this to work, the strip would need to be longer than the reveal wheel, so that it extends below the wheel when it's at its highest position. Well, at least I haven't found a way to work with the shorter strip yet. And here in my old model, you can also see that I fixed the strip below the wheel, which I'll get into in a moment. But this means that the strip has to be longer than the wheel. And since this is not the case under these circumstances, so with the 1 inch distance for the hole, I can't work with that at the moment. So this means that when using the reveal wheel panel, I can punch the hole in the wheel a maximum of half an inch from the center. A shorter distance is certainly possible, and that would have made sense with my capybara card, to be honest, because then the extent of movement would have been smaller and the capybara's diving trip wouldn't have been as long. So that means you should choose the distance carefully depending on your design. And please note that for a larger card base, so for example a slimline card, you could of course choose a larger distance from the center for the hole, as a bigger card would give you a bit more space underneath the wheel, allowing the strip to be longer without protruding. And while I was explaining all of that, I changed my model back to its first version, so the half an inch version, to show you how to continue. First, I turn the wheel so that the strip is at its highest position and replace my thumb with foam tape. I make sure that I give the strip a little freedom of movement and that I don't stick the foam tape directly next to the strip. And of course, I also have to make sure that I don't hinder the wheel. You can experiment with the spacing and see how it affects the movement of the strip. And since my strip keeps jumping over these little stoppers, I took a small strip of acetate and adhered it over it to trap my strip. And I chose acetate so that you can see what's happening underneath, but you can use paper for your card, or you can actually skip this step, since your decorative panels that you lay over your mechanism will take over this function. You can see that these stoppers ensure that the strip maintains its vertical orientation. Then I turn my wheel so that the strip is at its highest position and stick a small strip of foam tape to the lower end of the strip, below the acetate strip. Our moving image will later be attached to this, but first, however, I need to cut the background for the upper part of the card. And for this, I've cut another review base panel that I now need to cut to size. The background must end above that small foam tape on the strip. It can be shorter, but not longer, as it otherwise would block the mechanism. So I made a mark at the appropriate point and then cut the background to size, and then can attach it to the card panel or to the base panel using foam tape. As you'll see later in the card making part, I usually use a little bit more foam tape, but I was a bit more sparing with the model. Then I stick the background on and test the function. And as you can see, the mechanism still works perfectly. Now we can adhere our image, which I'll borrow from my old model. You can either attach the image directly onto the foam tape, as I did with my capybara card, or you can use an acetate strip, which I will also use for my new card. And when you turn the wheel, you can see that the mouse is moving up and down. Next, we need the lower part of our background, so the ground or floor. And for this, I die cut another review base panel, and I'll simply cut it to size with my scissors. The height of this piece is completely optional as long as the mechanism is covered. And the only other thing that we need to pay attention to is that you need to attach this panel with a bit more height, meaning that you need to use either thicker foam tape or 2 layers of foam tape so that the image doesn't get stuck on the edge of that floor piece but can move smoothly. But before we can apply our foam tape, we must consider that the mechanism needs space. So the white strips need some space to move. And in this area, we must not use any foam tape, because that would get in the way of our mechanism. And to determine where I can and where I cannot apply foam tape, I move the mechanism back and forth and mark the outer edges with a pen. So this means that the area within the 2 lines must remain free of foam tape, and on the outside of these lines I can apply foam tape. And I use thicker foam tape than the one that I used for the upper part to make sure that my image can move freely. And with that, our model is complete. This is how the mechanism works and how to build it. And now let's make another card with it. I have already prepared my wheel and my cardstock strip. Please ignore the second hole, that was an accident. And I'm sticking some tape over the legs of the bread so that it doesn't hinder the mechanism. And I have also already prepared my card base with some foam tape. As you can see, a little bit more than on the model. And I've also already attached a small circle to the card base. And now I'm threading my bread through the middle hole in my wheel, and close the bread and stick another piece of tape over it to make sure that nothing gets caught. After that, I can shorten my strip to the right length. And just like before, I'm sticking some foam tape to the left and the right of my strip to keep it in its correct orientation. And then I mark the area where there shouldn't be any foam tape to not hinder the mechanism. Then I filled the area outside those 2 markings almost completely with foam tape. And this time I used the same foam tape for the top and the bottom section, but I'll add a second layer to the bottom section later before I'll adhere my decorative panel. I stick a small strip of foam tape to the bottom end of my strip, to which I can later attach my image. And I've already prepared my base panel, and now I check whether the mechanism is completely covered, which is the case. Perfect. Now I can cut the background for the top of my card. And to make things easier for myself, I used the piece that I already created for my model as a template and mark on my background where I need to cut it. Since this edge won't be visible, I quickly trimmed it with my scissors. And before adhering it to my card, I wanted to make it a bit more stable as the pattern paper is a bit thin. So I cut another wavy panel out of heavyweight cardstock and attached the pattern paper to it. And after trimming this, I was able to attach it to my card. And I used my scoreboard to help me to align it properly. Then I adhered a second layer of foam tape to the bottom part. And as mentioned before, I want to use an acetate strip to position my image a little higher. And I cut the strip from heavyweight acetate to make sure that it's sturdy. And you can see that the mechanism works wonderfully. And next I can adhere my image to the strip. And I can have it either fly high in the sky so that it's visible all time, or I can place it lower and have it hidden behind a mountain on its lowest position, which is what I want to do. So I'm fiddling around with it until I find its best position. And then I will cut the acetate strip using my die cut as a guide. And then permanently adhere both the plain die cut and the colored image to the acetate strip. I'm placing the plain die cut below and the colored image on top. And then I just need to adhere my remaining images to the sky. And before gluing down my bottom piece, I determine where I can place some more foam tape. And for this, I'm turning my wheel to see where I must avoid the foam tape and where I can add some more. And I marked the spots where I can attach some more foam tape, adhere it to my card, test the mechanism again, and then I can glue down my bottom piece. And I'm again using my scoreboard to help me align everything. And here I just wanted to show you a little trick on how to stamp straight sentiments onto curved banners. I used the Wishing You a Happy from the Halloween mice and the Birthday from the I Heart Pandas add-on. They have the same font and size. And now I'm attaching my banner to the outside of my Misty door using some washi tape. And then I'll stick my stamps to the inside of the door, curving them along the shape of the banner. And here you can see what it looks like. And then I'm using any ink pad to stamp the sentiment on my grip mat, which is inside of my Misty. But you can also use a paper pad, that doesn't matter. Then I can remove the banner. I'll use the negative piece from my die cut and use it as a template and aligned it over my stamped sentiment. It will stick to my grip mat, but if you use paper, you might have to use a magnet or some tape to hold it in place. And then I can place my banner into the opening and stamp my sentiment onto the banner. I decided to use Fine ink and then heat emboss it with some clear glitter embossing powder. And here's the finished banner that I can adhere to my card. And here's the finished card. I created a shadow layer from dark red cardstock. And I used a red marker to color the edge of my review wheel because I didn't like the white one. But I don't recommend doing that. That didn't work out well. Anyways, I think the card turned out quite good and I hope you like it. I listed all the supplies that I used in the description box, and I linked the video tutorial on how to create the review template that I used. And before ending this video, I wanted to thank you again for watching. I really hope that you liked this tutorial. If so, I would be really happy if you could give it a like to let YouTube know that you enjoyed it, so they might recommend it to other viewers as well. I hope you have a wonderful day and I hope to see you again next time. Bye bye!